Welcome back to the Transfer Flow, and on today's episode, we look at Tottenham swoops for Kudus and Morgan Gibbs-White. But do these moves make sense for the Lily-Whites? We look at Chelsea reportedly trying to move on Nick Jackson for £100 million. We also look at Elanga off to Newcastle, Rashford to Barcelona, and we ask why only Galatasaray are in for Victor Osimhen. That's all on today's episode of the Transfer Flow. So we're back for another Monday edition of the podcast, and it's good to see you, Ted Knutson. How you doing, man?
I'm great. Thank you very much. The heat is finally broken. I'm not sweating my balls off. You wouldn't know that, but I felt I needed to tell you anyway.
I assume, though, that you can actually thermoregulate through the top of your head, because that is a good place to lose heat, is my understanding.
So weirdly enough, I am too cold far too often, and I rarely get too hot now. So could be that.
But that's what happens when you've gone through a period where you lost a bunch of weight, right? You suddenly you get used to being like to regulating your temperature at this weight, then you lose a bunch of weight, and you're like, oh my god, is this how cold it's been this whole time?
Yeah, your vascular system is like, guys, where did all the insulation go?
And now you're just blasting hot air into the stratosphere like an angry Godzilla.
Thank you. That's the best image anybody's ever described me as.
All right. Well, look, before we get into the transfers today, we do want to say to all of you, please make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We really do appreciate you showing up each week, but your subscriptions really help us too. And while you're doing it, we have the Premier League previews coming down the pipeline. From early August, we're going to have previews for all the Premier League sides. It's going to cost you £10. It's a one-off subscription. And in return, you get all those previews. So it's 50p a preview. It'll make you the best informed person among your friends on every single Premier League team going into the campaign. So I think that's well worth doing. And Ted, we've got variance betting coming up as well, right?
Yeah, so we're going to do the season preview outrights. These are all in the newsletter. So the podcast is kind of its own thing. These are the newsletter sides of it. And last year, the outrights were really good. We were recommending not Arsenal. We also said Leeds as an outright. We also said Manchester United, not fourth, all of which were like pretty decent payouts. There was one point it talked about Liverpool at 8-1 odds. If you snuck that one in, well done. But yeah, so we're going to do the same sort of thing again. And that'll be starting next week, I guess.
Yeah, so you can earn your subscription money back. Who knows? All right. Well, shall we go on to a team that's kind of rolling the dice this summer, actually? Tottenham Hotspur have got very active in the last week. They went from kind of having no attacking additions done, except confirming Tell, I guess, to having Kudus and Morgan Gibbs-White through the door. Kudus for about 55 million, 24 years old until next month, and Morgan Gibbs-White with a £60 million release clause, which seems to have prompted the extremely chill owner of Nottingham Forest to behave in an extremely chill manner.
Chillest dude in the Premier League.
Yeah, I know, right? Can you imagine Edu behind the scenes trying to, like, guys, come to my barbecue, have a beer, calm down. But as we'll come on to in a bit, Forest will have to get it into a little bit of a rebuild. But for now, Spurs adding quite a lot to their attack. And I do think that with these signings, it feels like they're on a mission to drive a wedge between, the kind of Twitter online ball knowers and the stats nonces.
Please tell me more, because this is my favorite piece of tea that happens on the internet.
Okay, so Kudus in particular, I think, seems to be, he's a guy who passes the eye test really nicely. He's pretty positionally flexible, or he especially was in the Eredivisie. He's a really high volume dribbler. This season, over 3 dribbles per 90, but the season before, he was at like 4.5, so crazy high. And it does feel that Spurs, who obviously got ravaged by injuries, could use a utility piece in attack. He's an easy player to like. He works pretty hard, and he does have a history of creative passing in the Eredivisie, not so much in the Prem.
Mm-hmm.
But that is exactly the problem. When you watch him and when you followed him for a while, you like him, you've seen all these different things you could do. When you look at his actual statistics in the Prem, he hasn't really done very much. And as Kim described him the other day, I think she said, guy who doesn't do anything, not my favorite type of player, something like that. And I don't know, Ted, what's your take on this? Because again, I find myself torn. I look at Kudus and I think, oh yeah, like this is a player, and then I look at his stats and I think, where did the player go in the numbers?
This is what I look at with actually the guys that Forest have been selling,
Sure.
which includes Elanga and includes Gibbs-White as well.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, trying to squint, trying to make it make sense, and scouting versus stats here. With Kudus, it feels like high variance Eberechi Eze might be like the description, right? Somebody that can dribble through the thirds, somebody that can throw a wild card in it, can play on the break and on the counter if you want to. But you don't know what you're getting. Like you know what he looked like in the Dutch league. We know what lots of guys have looked like in the Dutch league that have then washed out when they come to the Premier League. And what it feels like Spurs are doing in a very weird way is spending a bunch of money on Premier League proven players, but that don't seem to necessarily have that much upside that they've proven so far. And so I'm like, you're overpaying for guys in the Premier League that you're still not certain are going to be breakout stars in your team. I'm baffled by this behavior, but it also feels like kind of classic Spurs.
Yeah, this is my thing. I think if I pay £60 million for 2 attackers, for each attacker, I want at least one of them to feel like they have superstar potential. But both these guys are peak age, and we'll come on to Gibbs-White in a second. But I don't really have a good argument for why I would expect one of them would truly explode. I actually think Kudus would have made more sense for Ange's Spurs, right?
Yeah.
Because their dribbling last season was not effective at all. They attempted more dribbles than anyone in the league, but they had the lowest dribble success in the league. So what that means is they lost the ball on take-on attempts 40 times more than the team in second. They lost the ball over 100 times more than Arsenal and Liverpool with take-on attempts. And when you're a team that wants the ball, obviously there's a problem. You're coughing it up again and again and again, and they didn't seem to have much option but to keep trying it. And so it's no surprise they were getting counter-attacked a lot. Kudus does give you some of that high volume, ball carrying. He does give you the ability to, in theory, break down a set defense, though we haven't really seen him have to do that for West Ham. It's not like they face a load of deep blocks, I think. But for this version of Spurs, I'm just not sure I really get it. He doesn't get on the ball very much. The creativity doesn't seem to have translated. Shot numbers are solid, but shot quality is below average. Like he's at like 0.35 expected goals and assists per 90, which is
let's point out that he will definitely be on a more talented team, right? And so like he will have more options around him that will take more attention away. Not that having Jarrod Bowen around is he's pretty good actually. Like Bowen would have been a nice pickup for Spurs ages ago. I thought he could be very successful, 2-footed with shots, which is something when we did a scouting analysis for him at StatsBomb back in the day, and like the fact that he was such a good ball striker with both feet, a bit like Son ended up being, was quite intriguing for somebody.
And that James York thing about his finishes from close narrow angles, right, on his right foot,
like that classic sort of Sergio Aguero thing that that very few players seem to have. Lacazette had it as well. So it's I don't know what Spurs are doing yet. And I'm not entirely sure that Spurs know what Spurs are doing. Although there was a thing, somebody took a photo of a blackboard or a whiteboard with a line on it that like really warmed my heart. So it was allegedly from Spurs preseason camp, and like 2 players were goofing around, but it happened to have the whiteboard on it, and it said long throw additions at the bottom of it. And I was like, yeah, baby. But then I was like, fuck, if Spurs start executing all of my stuff, but it's Spurs, like. Little irritating, but you can't expect Arsenal to be like the sole holders of the set piece intellect forever, and obviously Brentford.
I think this is going to be a set piecey season. Like it feels like a lot of teams are trying to upgrade their set pieces this season.
Do you know how much easier it is to play with the lead? and if you're just and if you double the probability that you can score off of set pieces, like wow, that's really helpful. I don't know if teams are finally glomming onto this or not. I had an offer last summer to come in and do it for a team, but I chose not to. But you have to invest in it as a group, right? You have to invest in it as a coaching group. You have to invest in it as a club. Like you have to figure out who has the ability to take long throws or train them to do so. Same thing with the deliveries. You have to figure out which players are talented at doing this. And the only way you really do it is via making them take the same sort of delivery from corners or from free kicks over and over again. And so like that takes training time investment to do it. So Kudus, I'm okay with, I would say. It feels like a bit of an overpay. It feels like, actually, for some reason, the Premier League has decided 40 to 60 million is the sweet spot for all players that are vaguely competent. Like, the 30th to 80th percentile all cost somewhere between 40 and 60 million pounds. makes zero sense to me whatsoever. But that seems to be like what
Mhm.
everybody has decided in the league, and so that's Spurs are exactly in that sweet spot. The top end of that, I guess, is release clause aided on the Gibbs-White one, but I'm much like Elanga. I'm not feeling that one at all. I don't see it. Like I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't. Look, Gibbs-White again. I think is one of those guys he's been a bit of a darling of like English fans for a while. I remember about when he was leaving Wolves and he went for like 40 mil, right, to
42
Forest.
was what it said, the total amount, right? But that presumably had some clauses, but it was probably still like 35.
And I didn't really like that at the time, but I got told by a lot of people, well, look, look at his record with England's youth teams, and he's very highly thought of by everybody who's coached him, and blah blah blah. But I was kind of like, but does he do anything yet? And he has done a bit the last few years. He's been kind of 11 to 15 goals and assists in the league over the last 3 years, and I think he was quite a bit in a worse Forest side, but a more attacking Forest side. He was quite a bit more productive in 23-24 than in 24-25. But part of the reason for that is that he came off set pieces last season,
Mm.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he went from a bunch of chances created off set pieces to literally zero last season, and his numbers come down. And he's also a kind of 0.4 expected goals and assists per 90 guy. And to be clear for anyone listening, like we're not saying these guys are bad players or whatever, but
No,
but when you look at a guy like this, you think I want to have my scouts make a really strong argument for both why they think this guy is good and why they think the kind of good he is not represented in the numbers that we have, because
right.
the numbers are not exciting for Gibbs-White at all.
And the third element of that, so like how good is this player? Like
Mhm.
why do you think his goodness is not showing up in his numbers? And third, does this price still make sense? Like
Sure.
that's the third thing.
Mhm.
Everything is about price because every player in the world is sort of available at 50 to 60 million pounds, even the good ones, but not the truly great ones, right? And
Yeah.
so, why is this player a better choice for us than all of the other players that are out there that we could also pry out of places? Because, like, Marmouche was was not much more than this. like,
Yeah, that's true.
he's awesome, and everybody knew he was awesome. So, yeah, these are the hard questions that you have to ask when you're doing the recruitment, and I would love to see it, but um, I guess we'll find out instead. We're going to get the practical experiment.
Yeah, you've got someone like Osimhen, who apparently is going to go for about 75 million euros, including add-ons. So that's about 65 million pounds, right? This is the kind of neck of the woods you're in when you're paying this sort of price for players. And I don't know, like, I understand that they feel they were brittle in attack last season. I do get that. But I also think something like Angelo Stiller, no one has bought him yet. I think he'd have been quite a useful part for Spurs. I think
Mhm.
he would have cost less than 60 million. That feels like something they could have gone and done and then gambled on a younger attacker rather than saying Premier League proven guys who are 25. If you're going to go and get these 25-year-olds, are you not saying, well, we're hoping we'll do something serious in like the next 4 years? And maybe that's on the cards. Like I guess that's like the longest horizon you'd want to think about. But I don't really see Spurs competing for the league in the next 4 years.
So the
Maybe
way
they
that
can.
this looks to me is the thing that we talked about sort of quietly behind the scenes last week. This feels
Hmm.
like the Thomas Partey signing for Arsenal at the time that it occurred, right? Look
Okay.
at that Spurs core and say, okay, what are we expecting out of this Spurs core over the next kind of 2 to 3 to 4 years?
Hmm.
And what are their young players going to mature to? Because last year they took gambles on young players, and we
Yeah.
didn't like that because like they overpaid for like the gambles. Some of them worked out, some of them were like big question marks. Now you're looking at it and you're like, okay, well, they're not taking gambles, they're taking this, but like you can find not gambles elsewhere. Like that's like you
Hmm.
can find not gamble peak age players elsewhere and pick them up. And so that's kind of the counterpoint around this. I guess Spurs have decided that they wanted to just stuff peak age in for a couple of seasons and turn it over, but again, it's a price versus value thing, and I find this value to be a tricky one. We're not saying these guys are bad though. That's not
No.
what we're saying. We're just saying like none of this quite adds up to a sensible deal in our opinion. And then you throw Marinakis in it, and then it just becomes fun to watch.
Sure. I mean, well, that's the thing. Like these transfers could get more expensive if it turns out that maybe you got your information through the wrong channel. It still just feels to me like the best version of Spurs has Madison on the pitch. You know, like that is it's great to have Gibbs-White there if Madison's not playing, but I still just think I want Madison playing as much as possible because he was crazy when he played last season,
Absolutely.
and I want to squeeze that out of him. Like so I guess resting him from time to time is good, but I don't. It feels like they're kind of overstocked with attacking midfielders now. They have a lot of wide guys, but none who I truly love. I maybe with Gibbs-White, they feel with Brennan Johnson like they're happy with that deal. Like that, like maybe they think, oh, with the price we paid, actually we were right in our talent evaluation. Though I have kind of question marks about that, but it does not spark joy for me. I've got to say.
Too many 70th percentile players is kind of how I look at it. And also, like, why aren't you getting Marco Asensio?
That's interesting. So he's going to Fenner, right? Like he's going to go to Fenner, and I don't know.
He'll get paid for 2 years out of his
directly.
contract, and then not get paid for the last 3, and or however long that contract lasts. Anyway, it's fine.
Or I think that there are guys like Kangin Lee, for example, who is probably available this summer, probably available at less than 60 mil, also quite positionally versatile, like Kudus.
Nico Paz.
Yeah, Nico Paz would be very interesting. Like these guys are definitely worth a look when you're in the 60 mil range. Like basically, like you say, everybody's on the table bar superstars.
I feel like we're doing Spurs rebuild Mark II. All of a sudden, we're just like throwing out names like, why not these guys? Why does this not make sense? Anyway,
it's quite fun. I think if I were a Spurs fan, I'd think, okay, this looks like it might be fun next season. Though that said, I like Thomas Frank, but he is a less fun manager than Ange. Almost nobody is as fun as Ange for the neutral. Okay, should we move on then to the other Forest guy who's out the door this week? So Anthony Elanga.
I'm remembering that the total on Spurs versus Liverpool was like 3.75. And I was like, that's got to be over. You gotta like 3.75 is a crazy total. Like maybe 3.25 is a lot. 3.75 is just nuts for the Premier League. And all of my official gambler friends are like, that's got to be over. They're definitely going to have more goals than 4 goals in that match. Anthony Elanga might score more than 4 goals in the season.
Yeah, like he had 17 last year in the Premier League, 17 goal involvements. Just turned 23. He's homegrown. Like the shape of it makes sense, but it was off like 10 expected goals. The year before was stronger again. Like the year before, he was at like 0.5 expected goals assists. Those quite a lot of sub minutes, I think. But you look at that, and I can see the reason to dream. And I also look at Newcastle, and I think Newcastle were able to get Murphy in space a lot last season. And if they can do that with Elanga, then I think they will get traction out of him. And you kind of need to because he's a low touch guy. But he's been pretty creative. I mean, I just don't love the player, but and I don't love the price. But I'm not going to cry about it. I think it's fine. It's just my take on this is that if I were Newcastle, the problem I would be trying to solve would be, what do we do against weaker sides who are going to deny us space, who are going to make life miserable in the way we make life miserable for big sides? Like, how are we going to deal with those teams? And it feels instead with this and with the rumored move for Ekitike, though I think that's quite fun, it feels like leaning into the style they already have. And it's kind of like, let's make plan A stronger rather than let's add a plan B, which would be more creative passes. It still feels like if they face a deep block, the plan is going to be maybe Isak or Bruno or Gordon will do something, but they don't actually have...
And deep block. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like individual excellence. Now, to be fair to them, remember that run that they had around Christmas time? And the only knock on that run was that they were crushing small teams or teams that were like much less good than they were. And they were just, punching them down one after another. And that's like pretty valuable. So I don't feel like I hate it. The strength of Newcastle last year was particularly their midfield, right? When their midfield was together with the good players and they had like some pretty good fullbacks around them as well. And you have Ishak scoring goals. Then that combination is so tight in structure that it's actually easier for you to be able to have those wide creative players that can have some versatility about them. Now, Ekitike and maybe Ishak both on the pitch at one time again create some interesting mismatches. I don't hate this plan for them. The only issue that I can think of in my perspective here, and this is around team building, which is kind of what we were talking about all summer, is are you really just choosing players that kind of cap your ceiling? Which feels like an Elanga, right? Like you're like, let me raise the floor a bit, but also like, there's a ceiling cap. Or you're just like, okay, he's been on Forest, and Forest have been weird and they're not great, but like his trending from 2 years ago seems like it's good enough to pull the trigger. Now, it's interesting that multiple teams have decided that this is the case in the same summer in sort of going for these younger Forest players or youngish Forest players. I'm not sure that it pays off that way. Like this again is a thing that we talk about as risk and gamble, and the numbers involved are big. Like this is the thing that's just confusing to me. If you're making 20s and 30 million moves, like we don't complain about that because you can make a bunch of those these days in the Premier League. If you're making 50s and 60s, like you got a limited number of bullets, and if they don't pay off, like they're stuck. They just stay there. You can't get rid of them because the salary attached to a 50 million pound player is one that can only move inside of England. Like you can't even get rid of them unless like you get lucky and one of the giants decide that they want to overpay or take half of their salary as part of it.
And if you're a Newcastle fan and this is frustrating you to hear us talk this way about it, remember that your team had to sell Anderson and Minter last summer.
Right.
If you make enough moves like this and they don't all hit, then those are the kinds of sacrifices that you're going to have to make down the road. And Newcastle right now are trying to push themselves into elite territory. They're trying to get up against these sides that are not only better than them, teams like Arsenal and Liverpool, but actually have been better at recruiting recently than them as well.
And the only way that you sustain that is not making mistakes.
Yeah.
And the cheap buys that you do need to pay off or be able to ship them back out. Chiesa was cheap. Minamino was cheap. All these ones that Liverpool added, like they added on the cheap. And then those are like lottery tickets. The other way that you get lucky is if your academy is producing excellent players. And if it's not, then you're kind of stuck and you need things to pay off. So it's a great example though. Like you're telling people literally just this past summer, you had to sell players because you hadn't sort of paid the dividends on the players that you brought in. So it is happening even for these big teams. And if Newcastle were to fall out of the Champions League next year, God forbid, and these players suddenly didn't pay off, it would look much worse for them than it does right now.
Yeah, I think if I were them, I'd have said, you know what, Murphy was pretty phenomenal this season. We've got that guy. I mean, like, yeah, he's not going to last forever, but we've got that guy. I would have looked for a really dribbly, ball-carrying type. Maybe someone like a Gittins or a Madueke. That would have been interesting for them.
Don't let us kill your buzz, though. Newcastle fans, you'll be fine. Like, these aren't bad moves. We have some questions about prices. But if you got Ekitike, like, I would definitely tune in. I think it'd be fun.
Well, that would be sick. I would love to see it. Okay. The other story this week is somebody suggested to us that we should talk about players and where they should move more. So take a player who's on the market and try and figure out an ideal destination for them. And we've got a couple coming up. So one is fresh off selling Noni Madueke to Arsenal and winning the Club World Cup, a tournament that has great history and that we all care about. Chelsea are apparently willing to part ways with Nico Jackson. Jackson just turned 24. He's apparently only on about 100k a week, which is, as Chelsea cast-offs go, that makes him quite doable.
Sure. Madueke was even cheaper, allegedly. They did some good job in negotiating, much better than Chelsea had historically.
Sure. Jackson, though, I mean, Jackson had 15 goal involvements in the Premier League last season in 25 90s, 19 in 31 90s the year before, but underperformed expected goals. But his expected goal numbers are lethal. This guy's like 0.7 expected goals and assists per 90. And he was more of a dribbler the season before, actually. So he's extremely mobile. He could feasibly, not start off the left properly, but you could play him in a role where you expect him to drop a little bit deeper and ball carry, I think. What do you think about a possible destination for him? Because Chelsea apparently want 100 mil, which makes me wonder why Chelsea think they can do without a guy they value at 100 mil. Is there a club that comes to mind when you think of Nico Jackson?
So I was quite proud of my article that I wrote on Friday because it was fun and I thought that I touched on all sorts of interesting things that were going on in the market. For Jackson, like the most obvious place is the place that has a bunch of players that can't shoot the ball or don't shoot the ball up top, right? And can afford it. And obviously they would have to dig into the piggy bank from all the fired workers, but eventually it seems like Manchester United should be stumping up that type of money. Arsenal is another place that could really use this type of player. I don't think Liverpool want the top end of this. Like, say he's only 80 million only. Liverpool are like, we're not in that range. We're talking to Jean-Philippe Mateta over the weekend. So they still look in the market for talented, versatile strikers, but they're not at the top of market for him because they went top of market for Florian Wirtz. One of the things that you will see in the newsletter is we do lots of visualizations that were created by me when I was at StatsBomb and by my compatriots there. And we have these shot maps that are beautiful shot maps. And most of the shot maps in the world are shit. And they're shit because you can't tell what's going on. They're really bad at conveying information. We distilled this for a very long time. We tried lots of different types of ways to show this information. And the thing, Kim and I will mention in the newsletter, the thing that gets us excited is when we see a striker or a wide forward shot map that has lots of triangles on it. Sure. Triangles are sexy as fuck. And the reason why triangles are sexy as fuck is because you have a player that is running onto through balls and creating shots off of through balls. And that is something that Jackson has in spades. And if you're backing up from that, and if you're the nerd nonsense, as you say, you're like, through balls are one of the most valuable ways to play football, period, end of. And if you have a Chelsea team that, is facing teams that are a little scared of their attack, and you're still getting lots of through ball shots, that's electric. It's almost nobody has this. So yeah, I would be pretty excited about it. But I'm not sure that anybody really wants to help Chelsea out with additional expenditures of money and giving it back to them. And I'm not sure that anybody in Europe who Chelsea would be happy to sell to can really afford that much unless there's something going on with the player kind of getting some additional wage top ups. Because if he's only 100K, but also he's worth 100 million, the gap in his wage versus his transfer expectation is something like 250,000 a week. It's a massive amount of money.
He's on an 8-year deal. Like maybe this is where Chelsea are like, that's where the value comes from, because you're actually buying almost a decade of this guy's life off us. But it's like, Jackson, I don't know. I guess I don't worry about helping Chelsea out so much, because I kind of think that what I'm going to get for Jackson, let's say it is 80. I think that what I'm going to get for 80 with Jackson is better than what Chelsea can turn around and get with that 80. Like, unless they go and get, like, the only strikers on the market I like as much or more than this are like Osimhen and Nunez, I think. Unless I'm forgetting somebody.
I don't like Nunez as much as him, and I kind of adore Nunez, but the things that Jackson does with his movement, I think are more valuable than Darwin's sort of high volume chaos. Osimhen, I think we're unknown about because he's sort of on that tail end of his peak, and that one's weird, and we'll talk about that one in a second. So yes, I agree that he has a lot of value, and I also agree that helping Chelsea out doesn't really matter because they figured out so many ways around PSR that it's pretty much irrelevant, and they kind of had the endless checkbook last year, and now they've added money to it from the Club World Cup. So yeah, I don't see that as an issue either. It's really about which teams can spend the money and how much money do they have available, and I don't think 100 is a number that anybody's going to pay. 60 is a number that everyone would pay, and so somewhere in the middle is where you find it.
Yeah, I really like United. The idea of him with Cunha, Diallo, maybe Mbomo, that's fun. That's very fun. I also think Villa would be kind of interesting. There was a rumor they were going to get real money for Watkins. Like United were interested in Watkins. Obviously, Arsenal supposedly were interested in Watkins. If you can get real money for Watkins, who's 28, going on 29 now, I think, and put it into Jackson, who's just 24, I really like that.
Let's take that as the same follow-up question.
Okay.
What would you pay for Watkins at this point in his career?
So he's 28.
I stumped him. Sorry about that, guys.
God, it does come down to kind of length of contract and size of wages and stuff as well. But
yeah, figure he's going to get a 3 to 4 year deal. This is his 29-year-old season.
Yeah.
Christ.
I really want him to be the final piece for that money.
Yeah.
Like, go on, sorry.
What is he? 0.41 expected goals on StatsBomb, shot volume of 2.57, 2.6. Like that's like a 35 or a 40 million pound move. That's not like a 50 or 60 million pound move. And And allegedly, the Arsenal number was close to 60 in
Mm.
January. And if they didn't take that, I guess they really wanted to go for the Champions League, and they were still in the competition. So that's kind of why that happened in that way. But now you're like, okay, so that roll of the dice probably cost us, 15, 20 million in value.
I mean, maybe they think, look, we sold Duran like for this huge fee, and maybe they expect, as has been talked about, that the market's going to shrink in the next couple of years, and in 2 years when they go to buy a striker, they'll be buying a striker at kind of like the 60 level rather than the 80 level. Maybe that's like kind of their vague hope, but I don't really know like what the plan is there. It felt like they had the 21-year-old striker that everyone wanted, and they shipped him out to keep the 28-year-old striker who a couple of people want. I mean, I think if you were going to go and get Watkins, you would want to be an Arsenal type team where you say, like, we're close to winning. This is a guy we need now. But yeah, I think I could be talked into 45, like if the wages were okay, but I did not like it at the time. And I think you said, do we totally believe this? That this is happening? Reputable people are reporting it, but it doesn't quite add up.
Further Color said that there was a disagreement amongst the parties that have to decide at Arsenal, and you couldn't get enough of them to have a quorum to pull the trigger on it. So
okay. The other team, just before we move on, is I do think that if they hadn't spent a bunch of money on their attacker over the last few years, I do think Atletico Madrid would have been quite fun for Jackson. Mm-hmm. I think that would have been very enjoyable. But they went and got Alvarez, who's kind of like a more evolved, more cultured version of this, I think. But Jackson's ball carrying would have been interesting there, and he's a really smart runner. I think that if anybody gets him, they'll be very fortunate. If Chelsea keep him as striker depth, they'll end up making less money on him next year, but they will have a very, very strong front line.
Yeah, we think he can play anywhere, and maybe Chelsea just decide that they're loaded up for bear now. They're pretty comfortable off of the back of this Club World Cup win. They beat the best team in the world 3-0 yesterday. So maybe they're just like, well, we're very bullish on this. Let's go ahead and roll the dice and see if we can compete at the top of the Premier League. I don't think they can, but they're probably not that far off, at least in terms of talent.
Sure. Yeah, agreed. Okay. The other player who we need to find a destination for then is Marcus Rashford. So Marcus Rashford, at the beginning of the summer, there were loads and loads of stories that said Marcus Rashford, he's just his dream is to go to Barcelona. All Marcus Rashford wants in life is to go to Barcelona and not be paid for 3 years. Like that is what he wants, to go to a club which will promise him his wages, like in an IOU written in crayon, and then he will never get that money. But now, because Barca struck out with Nico Williams, I mean, everyone struck out with Nico Williams, Luis Diaz looks like that he's not going to happen. If he does happen, it will be to Bayern by the looks of things. Barca now seem to have circled back round, and they're saying, oh, we kind of like the look of this Marcus Rashford guy. His wages are bananas. And the only way I could see this working is if United say, I think you said something like this, actually, that United are going to have to like pay off you. I think you made a joke about it, but United would have to pay off his wages, basically take no fee. And then Barca would have to kind of say, okay, like your grandchildren are going to own our stadium or something. The moving parts on this deal financially are bewildering.
Who was it? So there's two different things in the rumor mill recently, and this is when it pays to like read this nonsense all the time, because like some interesting phraseologies come out and you're like, did someone make that up or is that intentional? So Jadon Sancho has an agreement with Juventus, but is looking for a severance package from Manchester United. And I was like, and Vlahovic is another one who is at Juventus and also looking for a severance package, because like the wages are so big that no one's taking these players. And so in order to release them, like, you have to find an agreement where they pay off some portion of the wages and then they go on to the next contract. Rashford is like that. And the reason why you're only hearing Barcelona is because like most teams are smart enough to not be interested in it and going at a real level there. Villa almost helped them out, but at the end of the day didn't. Same thing with Chelsea and Sancho. Like that clause to get out of owning Sancho seems like a pretty valuable clause for them to own. I love that we're seeing lots of photographs of Rashford, ripped with his shirt off. Like, I'm in great shape. I've got another 5 to 10 years of my career. I'm going to play until eternity. That hasn't been the case, but I'm not getting paid enough to pick where Marcus Rashford should go because it's too hard. It's just too hard.
I mean, I can. When I imagine him on the field
Leeds.
for when I imagine him on the field for Barcelona, I can see it when Barcelona have the ball. You know,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, your Mal crosses, and then you've got Lewandowski and you've got Rashford arriving at the back stick. Like, okay, I can see how this works. When Barcelona don't have the ball, and Bayern fans listening will probably be thinking about the second season of Flick, where Bayern was still very, very good, but went from being like a plus 50 expected goal difference over the course of the season to like plus 35 and about level with Leipzig, and were much more porous. Like,
you can't have holes in your front press. You cannot have it. It will kill them over and over again. And their back line is not good enough to like keep up with the holes in the front press. So if Rashford is suddenly a hole, as opposed to Rodrigo, who was unbelievable last year, or not Rodrigo, but oh my God, who's the player of the season? Yeah, Rafinha. Sorry, different Anyway,
well, and Olmo as well. You know, Olmo's a tryhard. Like these guys are just going to run and run and run. And obviously the midfielders like Gavi and Pedri. Like, what's so incredible about these guys is the combination of talent and their insane work ethic. Like, Rashford actually did up his in limited minutes. He did up his defensive effort for Villa. I think, you know, like we saw a significant uptick in his defensive actions, and also his creative passing was really impressive for them. Though sub minutes, blah blah blah. I just think for a team like that, I think sometimes you think an inferior player who is going to do all the shit they need to do. You know, like it always reminds me a bit of like the Pedro thing at Barcelona, where people are like, why does Pep love this guy? You're like, because this guy will do the thing that Pep wants him to do. Like, Pep's a control freak, and he's just like, go out there, close that guy down, don't ever let him past you, make his life a living hell. And Pedro will do that all day, and that's why Conte liked him as well. Whereas with Rashford, I just think maybe he arrives in Barcelona and he's just like, I've arrived at, you know, I've managed to get this move to one of like the most storied clubs in football history. I'm going to work my ass off, but I don't know how much his body holds up to that at this stage.
I want to be Gary Lineker of the modern age. Like, you know, we've got this English player playing for Barcelona. I think what was really interesting coming out of this past season that some people might not have noticed is that two of the biggest teams in the world finally had superstars or super talented players that switched into the style, and they actually like gave everything for it. So the first one is Flick, and he had a bunch of kids, but he's also got kids that haven't like switched into Messi mode, where I don't want to run, or like I don't want to do the defensive scuttle, which hurt Real Madrid this past year too, right? Because like Mbappe and Vini are not doing the things that have to be done in order to contain these elite teams. And then you got PSG, where the other guy used to be there, and then they did it. They did the thing that Enrique had been just coaching people over and over and over on, and they finally got there, and they were a buzzsaw. They were an absolute thresher through everybody in Europe up until this last game. And that is, hey, we have this awesome style. Everybody knows kind of what the style needs to do, but the players have to commit to it. And if you have a lack of commitment, then you can't play it. And you're always trying to sort of do suboptimal things there. The worry about Rashford is, for me, we are trapped by the economics of this deal. It makes no sense for anybody to figure out the economics. And so like, if you do just pay off his contract to get rid of him, or some portion of his contract for, you know, the next agreement, then that's the only way that this works anywhere else. Otherwise, it's another loan for some period of time, and he keeps surfing around from place to place, which I think kind of sucks for him. I think he'd like to find a new home.
Well, yeah, and I think that the most obvious place for him to go would be somewhere in Italy. Like this, we've said this a bunch of times, but this kind of hybrid forward, you know, a little bit of a winger, a little bit of a centre forward. Italy is the place where you can be that guy. Like, you can go to Inter, you can go to Napoli, you can go to Atalanta, and Atalanta might let Retegui and Lookman go this summer. Like, there's a slot for you. Can you drop your wages to a level that Atalanta can do? Like, if you're willing to do that, then great. But Inter have gone and got Boni, Napoli, look like they're holding out for Garnacho or Nunez. So
do you want to go hang out with Scott McTominay?
He'd love that. He'd love that. I mean, clearly, we do have to say on this one, like, our question when Rashford was looking at a loan in January was, is there a player here still? And there clearly is a player there still. How many 90s you get out of him in the season is an open question. But like, there is still obviously talent there, and he is not against working if he's shown a reason to do it. But yeah, I always look at what you were talking about just now reminds me of like 10 years ago, it must have been. Gary Neville, like pre-brainworms, Gary Neville was on comms for Chelsea, I think, getting knocked out of the Champions League to Atleti at Stamford Bridge. And he was pointing at Eden Hazard, and he said, people give him a break because Eden Hazard's their best player. But he was like, look at the players that he's letting go here. Look at the guys ghosting in at the back post. And he said, what you need to say to him as a manager is, do you want to win the Champions League? Because if you do, then this is what you need to do. And there are some managers who can deliver that message, and some players who are willing to hear that message. But if you're not, then you're stuck with a guy whose value is just going to get lower and lower in the modern game, right?
So I have training ground information on this. Way back when I was building the set pieces stuff for Brentford, actually, we had video from, for some reason, I think Atletico Madrid had actually put this out. So this is like 2013, 2014 video of them going through training. And they used to bring a crash mat with them, even on their European journeys, because I know this from Leverkusen when I worked with Schmidt as well. And basically they're like, what the fuck is this? Why do they have crash mats? This is not football. And the crash mats were there because they would do physical training. So like, like little run through the rings, like, do something, a little shift for like, warm-ups type stuff. And then at the end of it, they would have diving headers. And everybody in the squad would take these diving headers. So like not just the center backs, but you have Antoine Griezmann, World Cup winner. You've got Diego Costa, like guys that have legit pedigrees that are taking these diving headers and having fun with it. But like you having to retrain everybody to go after the ball and score these headers. And then you see later that we have the video of these diving headers being scored. There are like two different instances where these players are scoring diving headers with Atletico Madrid. And it's like, look, you're not better than Antoine Griezmann. Like your career at League One or wherever the fuck you are is not going to be better than that. Like, you need to switch on like these guys. If you want to succeed, like you need to actually dedicate yourself to this element of it. And some places we get buy-in, and then other places the coaches just kind of shrug because like they don't really know or care, but the owners have forced you to come in and try and teach them set pieces, and they look like you've got six heads. And it's a fun little interesting thing. But I remember that very vividly because you're exactly right. You and the thing that's going to happen this year and for many, many years is that you're going to see the Luis Enrique and Mbappe video come up, and then you're going to see Ousmane Dembele winning the Champions League right next to it. You're like, this is the difference between winning trophies and not winning trophies at the highest level. Which one do you want?
Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect. Okay, we've got time for another couple of quick hits before we go. Victor Osimhen, reportedly close to finalising a move back to Galatasaray. Apparently it's going to be 40 million euros guaranteed, then 35 in what I assume must be exceptionally achievable add-ons.
Add-ons and installments was what I described as.
Christ. But you're like 75 million euros. Arsenal apparently paying 70 plus 10 for Victor Gyokeres. Like, why is nobody else in for Osimhen? And when I try and like square this circle mentally, I have to come back to behind the scenes factors. Shall I put it the way I put it in my notes to you before we start shooting?
Please.
Okay, so 2 questions in my notes next to Victor Osimhen's name. One is, how insane is the wage ask? Question 2, is his agent a cunt? Because I was just like, this doesn't compute. Like he's fantastic. He is the best striker available on the market this summer. He is 26 years old, so it's not like he's way older. He's younger than Gyokeres. He's right in this pack of guys. He's got extremely high production across leagues. He's a title winner in Italy. He could do all sorts of stuff. He's incredibly dynamic. Like he's not one of those guys who went out to Turkey and was like, I'm never going to run again. Like he really does continue to work for them. Rips shots, 2-footed, great in the air. Like we love the guy, and yet he's going back to Galatasaray for what feels like a completely reasonable fee relative to the market. Like what the fuck is going on? How are Chelsea at least not going, we will take Victor Osimhen? Yes, thank you.
I don't want to say anything that gets me into trouble in the future. I'm just going to say
get into trouble with me if you don't say anything.
I don't know the answer to this question, but I'm going to have some speculative guesses that would definitely get me into trouble. Okay. And some of it had to do with his trending of activity before he left Italy
Okay.
and how much you believe in Turkey, right? Because like nobody ever does big moves out of Turkey. Like
Sure.
that's not a place that happens. But yeah, there's definitely something that we don't understand about all of the details in this potential transfer that is leading us to be very confused. And along the same lines about agents, Gyokeres, there was a line from I think Ornstein that said, yeah, his agent has agreed to waive his fee in order to facilitate this deal. I'm like, this agent has worked harder than anybody over the last 2
Yeah.
years. Like, this guy's name is in the media all the time as a potential good transfer for folks. We've never quite believed that he's a great transfer, but if it happens, like the agent had a big part in this.
Yeah.
It's like he's waiving his fee. Not very confused about how that one's getting paid as well, but you know, it's intriguing.
Okay. Well, look, Osimhen, I guess, is just going to like tear up Turkey until he retires. Like, whatever. I just don't care at this point. The last one I wanted to ask you about is quite an intriguing one. So with Forest losing all their attackers, they've been linked to Wissa, Yolandi Wissa, as I like to think of him, of Brentford. I don't know if anybody listening likes Dianford, but Dianford, Yolandi Wissa. They turned down like 25 mil for him. He's got a year left on his deal, though. Like, I can understand why you don't want to take that little for him, but he does have a year left on his deal. And I don't know if you're going to get the 50 range that apparently everybody costs. I like the idea of him for Forest. What do you think? What's a reasonable price for a guy like this with a year left on his contract? Do you think Forest is a good fit? Because to me, I look at Forest and I think, yeah, okay. I think this guy would cook at Forest.
I think he would cook at Forest. I like him. I think hopefully that he's still got decent legs for his next contract in the Premier League. I think that he's been sort of quietly somebody that did better in the Premier League than I was expecting. Like we flagged him up ages ago in some of our scouting. We're like, oh, he's really intriguing. But I wouldn't have necessarily thought that he would do as well as he has done in the last couple of years. And he's been excellent for Brentford. Forest don't have that far away in style than Brentford played. So again, like not too different and difficult for him. I think the issue here at the Brentford side is basically like they don't want to change a ton of stuff. And they think that he definitely still has value as well. So at some point, you're like, look, the risk that we have to go get even anybody else is not insignificant. We've got Shada that's there, that's fine, but like we don't have enough replacements for Mbuemo and Wissa to disappear and Norgard to be gone and a new coach. Like there's just a lot of things thrown up in the air. So I can understand them holding out a bit. I mean, I think that they've held out for more from United than I ever would have expected. Like Mbuemo going for more than 50 million is kind of intriguing. And so because of that, like they can play hardball here too. They don't need the money. They've got the turnover. They're going to reinvest it now or in the future. So I think that like I said 40 would definitely get a deal done, like maybe even, 37.5 or something like that. But yeah, I think Brentford like play hardball because they look at everybody else that's going and you're like, we like this guy. We know he's got a good year left and we don't have to sell. So come pay the price or don't.
Yeah, it's quite a scary season as well for Brentford. Changing your manager, potentially losing Mbuemo, obviously swapping out Norgard, which I guess is why they were like, okay, Kim's idea that maybe Malambo is going to be moved deeper and be the central midfielder, but then it feels like they've gone and got Henderson as well as a bit of insurance there. So they've got an older guy and a more of a project. I don't know. Maybe Brentford are looking at this situation and thinking we can't get relegated, guys. Like we've got to be careful here. But I guess I'd just be sad if they lost him for nothing next year because they've really made a very good Premier League player of him. But
there are times that happens, and sometimes like stability and not changing it is worth the value of that, especially as players are actively wanting to kind of hold on to the end of that contract so they get the signing on fee from somewhere else. So like that also happens at times too. You've got to balance a bunch of different factors there. Yeah, it's a tough spot. I think he would be good at Forest. I think we definitely know that Forest have to get busy and signing some players that are not strictly to and from John Textor related clubs.
You know what? I'll say this for John Textor: like he keeps it tight. He's never loose-lipped. He never says anything silly publicly. The Mbermo price, though, it reminds me of, I don't know if you might remember this, but this is OG StatsBomb podcast. This was you and Ben Pugsley years ago. I remember you talking about when David Luiz went to PSG from Chelsea, and it was like, how did this conversation go? Did PSG ring up and they were like 40, and Chelsea were like, let's ask for 50? It feels like that way with Mbermo, though. I like Mbermo a bit more, but the opening price was like 45 plus 10, and Brentford were like, okay, well, I guess let's ask for 65 and see if we get it. And it feels like they're going to get it. It's crazy.
Do you know that this happened with Gareth Bale?
Oh, Jesus Christ. What?
It happened with Bale. So there was like, nobody knew what the price should be around Bale. And they're just like 100. Like, well, I don't know. 100's a pretty crazy number. Like, oh, it's fucking Real Madrid. Let's ask for 100.
Yeah.
And eventually they're like, fine, 100. And that's allegedly, that I've heard from some pretty good sources that, yeah, there was like no real price. They probably would have settled for like 60, 65, but they're like, no, fuck it, ask for 100.
Yeah.
And eventually it got there.
But then Real Madrid also had to do their finesse, right? Where they were like, actually, because of the change in the Euro, Cristiano Ronaldo still costs more than Gareth Bale. It's very important that everybody knows this, because Cristiano Ronaldo is going to have a fucking cry about it. Okay, I think that probably does us for today, unless you have an opinion on Christian Mosquera to Arsenal. Though he's born in Alicante, like all good people, Alicantino, borracho y fino. He's kid. He's CB. He doesn't like jumping for headers. What's not to like?
I like Kiwior better, but I feel like Kiwior possibly is on his way out. That was good business by Arsenal. I loved it when they did it, and thought like if they give him any real credit and he doesn't completely embarrass himself, like he'll double the money, and that's probably what's going to happen there. So yeah, it's more of a depth signing. I think Arsenal are doing a pretty good job of building that squad depth, and this is exactly the type of fee that we've been talking about everybody else. Like, why aren't you paying fees 20 million as opposed to 40, 50, 60 for these other players? But yeah, you got to shop for it. So recapping the stuff that you will care about soon, we have season previews. These used to be some of the most highly regarded previews when we did them on StatsBomb. People loved it when we did it. It was so much work in order to do it. We're doing it at the Transfer Flow now in a very similar style. Like, we've got some great writers that'll be included. Mo Square is going to be on there. Kim's got a lot of them. I'm on it. Neil's on it. So a couple of other people that have guested on it. And if you're looking to support us, like, this is a great way to support us. Like, spend the £10. You'll get some of the best content you've seen about the season preview stuff, and you can continue to help us make these shows. And then the other side of it is, like, if you're interested in the gambling side, like, we continue to do that. That was very successful last year, and the season previews for that will come out probably in a week's time. I'll start to talk about the early wagers around it. So yeah, check it out. We really appreciate your support. I just wanted to mention it again because it's kind of a big deal for us to get ready for the next season and to continue this rolling along ship or snowball that keeps going downhill. Whatever we want to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you like our free content, this stuff kind of helps us keep the lights on, helps us continue to churn it out for you. And, every bit of feedback we get as well helps us move towards content that you guys like more. As you can see, from the topics we've touched on in today's show, we do take your opinions on board. So make sure that you do get your comments and players that you want us to talk about, clubs, managers, get those into us, both on social media and on YouTube. We really appreciate you listening to us. Make sure that you do subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I guess we'll catch you on Wednesday. Say goodbye, Ted.
Goodbye.